something. I was a good student in school, and I was always afraid, mortally afraid, that I didn't do my homework, or I'm late to the classes, or anything like that. I just remember these feelings of like cold in my stomach. And then I think when I was about 10 years old, I found out that my father, when he was studying in the Leningrad school just after World War II, he was actually a bad student, and he organized everybody in school, in his class, to leave the classes and to go and buy ice cream and, you know, just do this like totally forbidden stuff that was like breaking the rules so badly. And I remember how I felt like, wow, this is even possible. How did he do that? Yeah, and then he was caught, and some student wrote him out and told that it was this guy, Eduard Dubrovsky, who convinced us all to go to leave the classes. And then when the parents come on the parents' meeting, my grandfather, who was just coming out as a hero from the World War II, as many other parents was, he was saying like, okay, I will punish my son, definitely. But this child who told the teachers about like his bad behavior, if I would be his parents, I will punish him too, because I would not go like, you know, on the like how he put it in the military operation with this guy, and everybody, all the parents was kind of like, yes, that's true. I was like, wow, that's something very, I think it was something very important for me as a child, this story was.
Hi.
Hey.
The warmer question is what makes you feel free, or what's the question?
Oh, what is your anything life experience related to the feelings of freedom of yourself or the other people? It could be anything. I just gave this example because I grew up, of course, in like more or less, you know, kind of centralized, almost totalitarian state. So for me, the challenge and authority was always a sign of claiming your space and your freedom. But probably some other things are possible.
I would say kind of freedom, like in the moment for me, is like playing music. Like there's a freedom to just kind of experiment and do stuff like that. So there's a sense of freedom there. There's a sense of play and consciousness, I suppose, or how about others?
I missed the question or the prompt.
Yeah, maybe it's like too serious question for the warming up. Yeah.
I don't know. I remember one time I was in a party, like in the forest, and we just were like, it was like the morning, the sun rose, and we were just talking. We had been talking for hours, and I don't know. I just felt, in a sense, I was just looking around after having been talking for hours with all these friends, and I just felt, I looked, because we were in nature, and I just felt like there was, in a sense, no difference between nature and us and me, and that in a sense there was no me, but you know, I was just all one with everyone and with nature. And I don't know how to explain it really, but I did feel very free at that point, and it's somewhere I always go back. when I feel bad and try to remember how I felt at that moment, just as, yeah, as if in a sense, there was not me. I was just one with all the grass and all the trees. And I don't know if I explain myself properly, because I have never been able to explain it, but I would say that that was a very important moment for me. And I did feel free then, in a sense.
Should we just start the reading group, because maybe it was not really too adventurous?
For me, freedom was improvising music. I was totally unable to play anything. I was 11, and it was the 77-year movement in Bologna. All universities in Italy were occupied, and there was really the sensation that everything was possible and that it could be done, everything. And even playing music when you were totally unable to, but you were together with others and you played along with others.
Yeah, for me recently, I also felt very free. I was in a city recently where I was I felt totally led around, not by my own volition completely, but and was able to break things like my rigorous diet, and just for I think, I don't know, a week or so, I was able to just do as I was led, taken to do. I felt, so my experience of freedom was actually very recent, and I hope that sticks with me.
Hello, I can go. I recently felt very free because just a week back I passed my PhD defense, and it was a long, very long process for me, very torturous process. So 8 years, and finally I am done. So yes, I am in that phase when I am feeling free. And also I dedicated my dissertation to David.
Nice.
Somebody wants to talk more, or should we start? Anybody
I can go. I can show. I got my second vaccine, so I feel like I'm starting to be free a little bit.
Wow. So if we start now, I will just, maybe I will ask Elizabeth to start with the article. I think if everybody read it, should we summarize it? It wasn't a long text.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Gosh, I'm not sure I'm going to be great at summarizing it. It's an article that sends me in it sends me in different directions. It's very slippery for me to read it, for reasons that when I share my portion of the presentation, I can explain. But it's a kind of a reflection on the observation of play in animals, and an observation of the reluctance to accord that experience to animals. And that leads David down these roads where he's examining the history of evolutionary theory, which obviously has relationships to economic theory. He takes a bit of a path into physics and the behavior of electrons. So he goes from biology into physics, and then ends with a Chinese parable that is also about the observation of animals in play, but then kind of just brings it all back to the human through that process. Was that okay as a summary?
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And then I have a little slideshow that I don't know if now is the time, but I have a little slideshow which is sort of what it's like to read this essay as someone who has a background in a very specific like foundation in feminist science studies. So let me know when it's time for that.
Yeah, you can do it, or you can share the screen because I make you a co-host. So
shall I do that now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got my second vaccination on Monday, and the way I've been describing it to everyone is that I feel like I am made out of scrambled eggs. So it's a little like quite physically I'm made out of scrambled eggs. So it's a little strange for me to, I don't know, to be in my instructor role and feel so incoherent. So I just appreciate everyone's patience here. Can you all see this?
Yep.
Slide? Okay. So I wanted to address this idea of the world's independent sense of humor as a feminist science studies companion to David Graeber's What's the Point If We Can't Have Fun? Kind of Donna Haraway, who's a real cornerstone for me in my own work, she often talks about cat's cradle, the formation of strings with fingers as a game where you have a pattern of knots and then you pass the strings to someone else and then they sort of take them up with their fingers and make a new pattern. It's a trope that she uses for talking about knowledge-making practice, that we sort of exchange ideas as like a string game. And for me, when I read What's the Point If We Can't Have Fun, I think about play, knowledge, the relationship between science and realism, coexistence, and political freedom. Like these are all nodes that for me, I have coming from feminist science studies, but to sort of see them play out in this essay through David's perspective as an anthropologist is really, I don't know, it's really fun for me. And just so as a little bit of a background, I have an MFA, and part of my MFA research was about researching play. So I make things like this. I made this like large toy boat that spent lots of time in all kinds of places, including out of the water. And it has a little audio component, which I'll play for you. So when the boat was touched or rocked, it would make these laughing sounds, and people would, because of our physiology, we tend to laugh in response to laughter. So this project was inspired partly by Donna Haraway and Karen Brad's work, who are both professors at UC Santa Cruz. And this quote in particular was the inspiration, where she says, "There can be an elsewhere, not as utopian fantasy or relative escape, but an elsewhere born out of hard and sometimes joyful work of getting on together in a kin group that includes cyborgs and goddesses working for earthly survival." Oops. Sorry. So this is another installation sculpture that I put together, kind of inspired by this thinking. That's my child. So So I just wanted to offer that as a little bit of background. So the two things that I think of most when I read this essay are the concept of situated knowledges, which Haraway coins in 1988, and agential realism, which Karen Barad coins in 2007. I'm just going to talk about situated knowledges today because I started to put together stuff around agential realism, and I realized that it just requires a lot of scaffolding, and I felt like it just would take too much time. So situated knowledges is an essay that builds on top of Haraway's much more well-known Manifesto for Cyborgs. And a Manifesto for Cyborgs was a response to a prompt Haraway had received to talk about feminism and socialism, or gender and labor. And she's a very like contextual writer. And so when you read the Cyborg Manifesto, I think it's really helpful to, for those of you who haven't read it or want to read it, like to really put it in the context of 1985, right? Which is like the Macintosh computer has just come out, like word processing as like a form of scholarly practice for writing, right, is just establishing itself. And so she is thinking about her own labor as a scholar in relationship to the computer and the way the computer is increasingly fostering a globalized economy. Oops. And so she takes a piece of the Cyborg Manifesto that I'll talk about and builds on that for situated knowledges, where the question really becomes more about how to integrate feminism in science, and this idea that we can create a sort of successor science to the kind of science that was established in the Enlightenment. Right, so the Cyborg Manifesto was written in 1985 as an ironic political myth that has become a touchstone for thinking intersectionally about gender and labor, race and technology in an accelerating economy globalized by digital capitalism. So I think that's an important thing, that she's offering the cyborg kind of as a mythic figure. Most importantly, for a practice of situated knowledges, cyborgs call attention to the specificity of how we as human-machine hybrids see. Cyborg vision is mediated by all kinds of technologies, including and especially this thing we've called culture. And I find this when Haraway talks about culture, that, that's where she really, I don't know, like the synergy with David as an anthropologist, that really starts to come through for me. Contemporary science fiction is full of cyborgs, creatures simultaneously animal and machine, who populate worlds ambiguously natural and crafted. Modern medicine is also full of cyborgs, of couplings between organism and machine, each conceived as coded devices in an intimacy and with a power that was not generated in the history of sexuality. Reading, I reread a little bit of the essay preparing for today, and I wanted to include especially this part about medicine because of the having received the vaccination. And it really kind of calls me into my cyborg sense of self. This is a photo of my daughter that feels very cyborg to me, with her glasses talking to the FaceTime. So situated knowledges is a feminist scientific practice for creating stronger knowledge and better accounts of the quote unquote real world. It is premised on the understanding that what we know is inextricable from how we know, and how we know is a shared collection of perceptions by partially perceiving agents. And this partial part, I think, comes up for me when we think about friendship and the role that friendship plays in David's work. To see well, to understand more fully, to know anything, we have to work together. Part of working together is identifying or situating the points of view through which contributions are provided. So in the essay, Haraway says, I would like to insist on the embodied nature of all vision. I would like a doctrine of embodied objectivity that accommodates paradoxical and critical feminist science projects. feminist objectivity means quite simply situated knowledges. And part of the essay is, really trying to start to articulate forms of knowing that can critique, the gendered, raced, and classed qualities of the European scientific revolution. And so this embodied part is really important because kind of the idea of, objectivity and observation and kind of rational reporting of how the world works tends to be kind of contextualized as something that is very godlike, right? And not requiring the specificities of the body. The eyes made available in modern technological sciences shatter any idea of passive vision. These prosthetic devices show us that all eyes, including our own organic ones, are active perceptual systems, building on translations and specific ways of seeing, that is, ways of life. And part of her focus on the eye is also the sort of like feminist reclamation of what vision is for. There was like a sort of a period, right, in the following second wave feminism in the United States where like vision was kind of like, sort of other than vision for ways of knowing because it had been really co-opted by masculine science practices. But she kind of wants to bring vision back into the conversation because she doesn't want, vision is a very useful way to sense the world. So the knowing self is partial in all its guises, never finished, whole, simple, simply there and original. It is always constructed and stitched together imperfectly, and therefore able to join with another, to see together without claiming to be another. And so when I think about the parable at the end of the essay, I think of this moment and the role of conversation and friendship. Situated knowledges require that the object of knowledge, sorry, a little typo though, be pictured as an actor or agent, not as a screen or a ground or as a resource, never finally as a slave to the master that closes off the dialectic in his unique agency and authorship, of objective knowledge. So this is a really important turning point because understanding that vision is partial starts to open up like who sees, right? And this a very kind of open understanding of point of view. And so we start to destabilize the subject-object distinction, right? That so much of science has sort of been built upon. So acknowledging the agency of the world in knowledge makes room for some unsettling possibilities, including a sense of the world's independent sense of humor. We are not in charge of the world. We just live here and try to strike up non-innocent positions by means of our prosthetic devices, including our visualization technologies. And Haraway is often bringing humor and the idea of the trickster into knowledge-making practices because of the disruptive quality of things, and also because of the way that play is just an expression of agency, right? Which is like just another theme, I think, from David's essay. So I'll stop there. But I just, as a little summary, so we go from cyborgs, this idea that we're human-machine hybrids, right, to focusing specifically on kind of the technologies of vision, cyborg vision, and then recognizing because where our vision is always mediated, vision is always partial, their perspective is always partial, and the partiality of that then kind of sort of creates the requirement, right, that we have to acknowledge that agency might extend beyond just human vision, because it's no longer, as a simple thing. And extending that agency for Haraway means acknowledging that the world itself has its own sense of humor about what's happening. So, how is that?
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
So should we ask questions first and then go to Oan?
Or I can maybe try to offer a little segue too, because I know that Ohana is going to talk about the electrons. I mean, so what happens? So Karen Barat is a theoretical physicist who takes up Haraway's work and kind of brings it into conversation with Judith Butler's notions of performativity and gender, but she brings it like into the physical world and kind of makes the case that physical phenomena is an agentive practice, that subjectivity belongs to everything. And I think that's kind of where we get into David and the electrons, which I think is lovely.
Should I speak? Well, I think it's very interesting because I was researching Bhaskar for this, and the thing you say about subjectivity, that's something he really touches upon, because in his theories, which I think it was called at the beginning, like they call it, well, he called it transcendental naturalism, but then it was called like critical realism. And he tries to combine objectivity and subjectivity, and how, in a sense, there is an objective way, an objective side, of science, which it is what he calls ontological, which ontology refers to the things in themselves, so the world in itself, rather than how we perceive it. And then that side would be like objective and intransitive, in the sense that it doesn't change. It stays as it is, whether we know about it, whether we perceive it or not. And then there is the other side, which is the subjective side. And he relates subjectivity with epistemology, which is in philosophy the theory of knowledge, and our knowledge, how we can know about the world. And this is transient in the sense, or transitive in the sense that, as it is subjective, it can change over time, and it's also rooted in its context. So then he speaks as well like about this, he calls it like a paradox. So how is it possible that we create knowledge socially in a social context, but this knowledge is about things that humans don't create at all? So it's about the world. And so he goes against this idea of positivism, in the sense that positivism and empiricism, like, so the empiricists were, for example, Locke or Hume, who Locke is famously said that we were like a tabula rasa, like a blank slate, and we learn everything like from experience. And there is a sense in which positivism argues that we can know, we can, through science, know all these natural laws which don't change, they are immutable and they are universal. And Bhaskar, in a sense, goes against that, because he argues that, as you were saying, how to say, scientists don't really study nature or reality as it is in the wild, so to speak. They isolate it. And so once you isolate it, obviously the knowledge you will gain from your experiments doesn't really apply to the real world in the sense science tell us it does. So because science says that from their experiments, we get these universal laws. And Bhaskar argues, well, not from these experiments in which you have also isolated the components to study them, you get tendencies, which are, let me check. Yeah, you get these tendencies that are real within your experiment, and they can obviously, they happen in nature, but they are not these universal laws. It's not the same, because as being isolated, it cannot behave the same way as it does, like when, you know, in the wild, so to speak. And let me check. Yeah, this is, he was also like, he emphasizes this, and this is where David was coming in, because David talks about entropy and how, you know, the second law of thermodynamics, which says that any complex structure or organism or thing, if you leave it to its own means, it will tend to deteriorate. That's the second law of thermodynamics, that's entropy. But, and this, relating it to Bhaskar, is like, well, the thing is like, you are studying that in isolation. So that's how the organisms behave when you isolate them, but not when they are in what Bhaskar called open systems, which is the universe. And, or, you know, yeah, like the whole universe. And another very interesting thing that I thought was this, well, emergentism Bhaskar talks about. And an easy way, I think, to understand emergentism is like, so you have carbon and oxygen. And so, you know, separately, carbon and oxygen, they both are combustible, they help fire. But when they combine and they create water, CO2, water has a completely different quality, which is that it, you know, it kills fire. And so this is an emergent property from two things which don't have that property. When they unite and they combine into water, another property, completely different property, arises. And so this is what Bhaskar, in a sense, if I understand properly, thought that how our agency or our mental capacities or free will like was born. Like it was like, yeah, an emergent property of the human mind or the human brain. But there is where David really, I think, departs from him and says that he believes entropy to don't be enough, in the sense that, how to say, so how could something like free will or free agency be born from cyborgs or from purely robotic mechanical matter? And so he goes into physics and the electrons, and how in quantum physics there is this principle of indeterminacy. And this is, so when they measure where the electron is, they can know some possible locations where the electron can appear next, but they never can know where it will actually appear. And so David goes on to argue, well, could this be because the electron is dancing, or could it be because the electron is itself playing? Could this be that the electron actually possesses, or matter actually possesses, a kind of very basic form of agency or intention? And so if you take that, in a sense, to be true, then it's not such a big leap to go from a matter that actually organizes itself and it creates all sorts of complex structures. And then in humans, it creates our free will and our and our agency and freedom. And another very interesting thing that I thought with Bhaskar was that, so for example, he argues that natural structures, obviously they got these emergent properties, but he also thinks that social structures have them too. But the main differences between a social structure and a natural structure would be that the natural structure can exist independently of, you know, us knowing it or knowing it or noticing it, whereas the social structure is not independent from us, from the things they govern, which is us. And it is also, social structures are based in the agents' conceptions of what they are doing. So they are based in our beliefs, really, of what we are doing, what we are creating. And as such, they have this capacity for transformation. And also the fact that they are based in our beliefs make them obviously less stable than natural structures. And here is where I think Bhaskar gets really, really interesting, because, for example, since positivism and like the scientific revolution and such, there is this thing called like Hume's law. And Hume's law, Hume was an empiricist philosopher as well. And he thinks that the law is that you cannot derive any ethical conclusion from purely factual premises. And Bhaskar argues that this is not true because, and he calls this ethical naturalism. And he argues that if something like a belief or a belief system is, if something produces a false belief, then we can objectively judge it to be bad, like ethically bad. And so he goes, for example, to say that if capitalism produces a false belief or an ideology, then we can judge capitalism to be used ethically wrong. And from there, he also moves to say that rather than base this just in the false belief, he tries to base it in a sense of in human needs. And so if capitalism does not succeed in providing for certain human needs, then we can objectively argue that it is wrong. And I thought that was very interesting. I did never learned about it before. But yes, I thought that was really good. And yes, I think that was all I had to say. I hope I explained myself properly.
It definitely inspired me to, since the Museum of Care started, and this realization that David is like moving into like the work of science studies and philosophers of science, like, was really new for me. And I think I needed like just a friendly intro to Bhaskar, because I got the book and I was just like, oh yeah, no, I don't have the headspace for this right now. So thank you. I needed like a pre-digested.
Yeah, thank you. I also was very fascinated by Bhaskar because David always talked about him and tried to explain it, but it's very complicated for me. That it looks like he was totally unknown, very poor.
I didn't know him. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody knows him. He didn't translate it, I think, to any languages. I think that's one of the things that Museum of Care can do. They collect money to translate people like Roy Bhaskar, for example, or Mehdi Ben Hassim to different languages and so on. So It will be amazing. Yeah, so that's now my short part, and then we can talk. So I just want to say that for me, this article is like one of the most principled one from what David wrote, because I think he's very, in an easy way, kind of make fun or ridicule of the things that take, like everybody since it's a common belief system, like a major common belief system. Like, for example, David and I tried to get into the talk of Richard Dawkins in London School of Economics when he was giving a lecture in a big hall, and we were not able to get in. It was so many people, like, who wanted to see him, and he's keep repeating the same stuff forever. That is obviously, like, you know, in this text, I don't know who will argue that it make any sense, all of this basically neo-Darwinism, you know, but it is like very easily slip to economics and to everything else. So for me, it was like also, so what I want to say, it's about Kropotkin and David writing in this article about Russian answer to Darwinism, that was in the beginning of the 20th century. And Kropotkin, his famous book that become the basis for anarcho-communism, is describing his observation when for 5 years he was researching geology and biology in Siberia, and he's describing how animals are cooperating. And it's a very well-known text. I think most of the people knows about that. So I wouldn't go into details, but I want to tell about some other guy from the same historical period that is also not many people know about, but he was very important for the Russian avant-garde. His name is Nicola Vrinav, and he was a historian. He was a theater director. He was a guy who designed the Russian Revolution theater 10 years after conquering of Hermitage, the palace, and the famous movie of Eisenstein, October, based on the Vrinav theater production. But very importantly, Nikolai Vrinav is the author of the several theoretical books. One of them, I just want to show the cover. One of them calls theater, here it is. Animal theater. And so he's just translated it to Google Translate. So he's writing that Vrinav in this book, that we can clearly see how we're not only
Did we lose Nika?
oh,
Hello?
Hi, Nika, are you there?
that's complicated to share in the screen. Nikolai Vrinav developed the theory in which
Nika, I can't hear you. Are you still there?
yes, my connection is on
Don't all these internet things work on electrons? Like
slow.
maybe the electrons are fooling around and are playing.
So if you can hear me, I just summarize things about Nikolai Vrinav. So his ideas was that exactly what Kropotkin was talking about, place and the sheer feeling of pleasure for the animals and humans and the desire to collaborate. So Vrinav was talking about theater and the bone of the art. He was saying that this is a primarily instinct that we all living creatures have. And he's given a lot of examples of how the birds are playing and how like they're showing around during their mating rituals. And only part of that is related to reproduction, to any kind of benefits of survival. And very big part of that is about kind of building up of your own theatrical being, and then of course in humans. So, and yeah, I think it's I believe Vrinav is also becoming more and more popular now in art world and the other social science stuff. So I think we're just going to the new, hopefully to the new time when everything will be rewritten. Yeah, that's what I wanted to contribute.
That poster was amazing. I loved seeing it. We have been exploring in the Visual Assembly Lab this morning theatricality and its relationship to the social political, and we did a game with masks at the very end. So I think the themes are deepening everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting that hopefully with Visual Assembly we are going to do this project in Madrid with Zapatistas. And Mariana shared an article of a link on the article of Zapatistas where they're talking about art, and they're also saying how art is very much principle for and important for their existence, because that's the tools that can provide us with the objective picture of the world that we can then build. So maybe we can have another 15 minutes for people to say their opinion. I think Jonathan should tell us something about economic and freedom.
Well, yeah, funny enough, I was just looking at what Elizabeth was saying there about so much of the pleasure of play is our engagement to the unknown, unknowable outcomes. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I at the end of my long essay that I posted just before Christmas, I considered David's essay on play and tried to think about what it means with money burning, you know, whether that's a form of play with money. And I think there's a lot of scope there. And in relation to Elizabeth's point there, there's a guy called Joshua Ramey, amazing academic, activist, shaman guy who's I attend his seminars. He wrote a book. He's written a couple of books. One on Deleuze, the Hermetic Deleuze, he's called. One called The Politics of Divination, which I recommend. Amazing work. And basically, the idea of the politics of divination is that he looks at capitalism, or what he calls it neoliberalism, and he suggests that neoliberalism is an unavowed form of divination. So it's a way of trying to. It's so you could in Elizabeth's terms there, you could think of it as a form of play with the unknown, which is what kind of gambling is. So I think play, and I mean that's why I was here. I love David's essay on that and the way that he talks about electrons and all these different things. I think you can think about things. I think it's a way of seeing the world, and I think you can think about economics as a form of play, about capitalism, neoliberalism, all these ways of thinking about the world and money, the relationship between the material world and money. as a form of play. And that's where obviously I work. I think I'm only at the beginning of thinking about what I do in terms of money burning and rituals and all that sort of stuff in terms of play, but it's really powerful and a really great idea. And I'll just end with it. So I think one of the things that's really important with play that really gets at is this pulling apart of function. Because we live in this monetized economy, we're always thinking, well, what's the point of that? What's the purpose? What's its function? What does it do? So we're never in the now. We're always in the past, where it's come from and where it's going. And I think play is about examining the now, because you don't play for a result. That you play the game for it's an end in itself. And I think that's really a really important way to see the world. And I think it would really help if we could sort of shirk the fact that capitalism, neoliberalism produces all these horrors. And if we could get our head into thinking about it as a form of play, I think it might open up new ideas about how to interact with it.
Yeah, please send to the chat the names of the books.
Oh yeah, will do.
I saw that Simona had her hand up.
Yes. Well, this article made me think of an episode of my youth. I found my mother and father in a very heated discussion, because they lived apart, and I lived with my mother, and my father was, and I'd left my cat with my father for reasons that are not important in this case. And my cat wanted to be pet and to play with my father. And the heated discussion was about how could possibly an adult being want to be pet and to play just for nothing. And my father was arguing that for sure my cat was looking for food and was wanting food from him. And I looked at them and I told them, okay, you are seriously discussing this, and I'm not an insane person, so I'm very good. I'm very lucky to be a sane person when you discuss such a thing. You can even you cannot imagine a cat can play just for the fun of it and just for the pleasure of being and somebody in the chat asked me, isn't that the Spinoza's conatus? Yes, it is. And it is also Bruno's panpsychism, the idea that omnia quamvis diversis gradibus animata sunt, that is everything has a soul, is animated at any level of existence, and existing is the pleasure of being cause. That is something that David repeats quite a lot in his works. And this is very Spinozistic. This article is, David is as always demystifying the idea that we must have an end, and this end must be appropriation, and appropriation of food, of safety, of and he shows how it is not true. My cat didn't want food; he wanted to play, and it's amazing how in a funny way he demystifies this Hobbesian idea of a one-dimension being, where the only goal is to appropriate. The only goal is to create, to play, to have fun as an end in itself. And it should be obvious, but it isn't in our frame, because my father in this discussion was really an expression of the positivist and Marxist frame of thought. And it is very important to deconstruct and demystify this frame. So once again, thank you, David Graeber.
I think Muna wants to say something.
Hi, everyone. So definitely, I don't think food and animals have anything to do with play, because my dog, Habibi, plays after she eats. She's full and then she's ready to play. And I love this essay for multiple reasons, and I think it just also opens up the space for us to talk a bit about the art of exploration, maybe questions around more wonder and awe, even within animals themselves. You know, but back to my dog, we went to the beach for the first time. She's 2.5 years old, and the look that she gave me was like, what do you mean this exists, you know? But again, questions around play and during play, even if I remember myself as a child, it's in play that you find some sort of wonder about the world. Just some thoughts I just came into my head as you were speaking, Simona, about the cat.
Maybe Benjamin wants to describe his childhood experience of being a fan of Dawkins. I remember how he was listening to his lectures. If he wants.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. Yeah, I was super into Richard Dawkins and all these like anti-theists when I was like maybe 11 or something like that. But I really like the essay, and it also reminds me, I once actually had an argument with David about free will, because since I don't, I'm not a fan of Dawkins or something like that anymore, but I basically was arguing against free will, and he was saying that we do have free will, etc. And I realized of course the argument that we basically agreed, we were in complete agreement. It's just like the difference was freedom is a really relative thing. I mean, if you say I have free will, that sort of implies that other things don't have free will, right? Because you need to sort of impose your freedom. But if everything is free or nothing is free, it's basically the same thing. So that's what I meant anyway. So that's interesting. But I found also the other thing I found really interesting about what everybody so far has been saying about play is it's like this sort of this opposition between playing and freedom and work and rules. It's like this sort of ossified kind of structure where things are serious and it's not a game anymore, right? But the other thing I find interesting is, of course, in order to play and to have a game, if you remember also from being a child, I'm probably here closest to being a child from everyone here. You get the sense that you have to fabricate rules in order to play. You have to pretend things are serious for a while. You need to come up with convince yourself that if you're playing I don't know, like if you're playing soldiers, it's like little boys do, that it's like it's a serious war in the moment, you know. It's so I find that interesting. Like, how do you like where do you allow rules to be fabricated, and where do you say, okay, that's actually bullshit, these are all just socially constructed games that don't mean anything? And what's the kind of distinction between where that becomes pathological? I don't know.
So I think for that, Vrinav has a good answer, and I think like David would agree probably with him. But so the idea is that in order to play, you always have rules, but a play is a situation when you can rearrange these rules all the time. So that's like very important. And capitalism is a place where you cannot rearrange the rules or state, because they claim to be objective and scientifically back up and so on. So if the common understanding of what is reality will change, then we will just live in a different world tomorrow. Basically, that's what I think. That's why it's so important. So it has so much practical conclusions out of this like abstract conversation.
And I think it's, sorry to interrupt, and I think inherently animals understand that. Otherwise you just have dead squirrels everywhere. You know, my dog chases squirrels all the time and decides just to slow down just before she catches them, because she's not going to kill the squirrel, right? I don't know. This just came into my head. And, you know, at some level there are these unwritten rules that they do. I don't know. It's just some thought there about play between animals themselves.
I wish if at some point anyone else is interested, it would be so fun to bring Karen Barad's theory of agential realism into the conversation, because I mean, really it's premised on some very subtle interpretations of the difference between like what Heisenberg frames as uncertainty, right? That at a certain scale, we can't determine the position of these subatomic particles. But what Niels Bohr rather framed as indeterminacy, which is slightly different in the sense that the things we want to know about the particle are inherently unknowable. And so there's a lot of interesting things there around, you know, measurement as a knowledge-making endeavor. And it just makes me think a lot about how measurement applies to like the enforcement of rules in a game, right? Was the ball in or out? Like this negotiation of processes, or the way measurement applies to economic systems, right? What is the value of something? But it all kind of comes down to, you know, this understanding that this transformation of understanding, where we move from a belief that the world is a representational place, that we can assume a position for knowledge making that is outside of the thing that we're trying to measure or produce knowledge about, and then moves into this very like playful, beautiful understanding of performativity. And I think there's a lot there around just play and performativity that would be really lovely to discuss.
Well, one of my friends posed a question. I read a paper the other day, a guy called Noah Murin, and he posed a question just related to what you were just saying there. How do you measure the pleasure of measurement? And it's kind of one of those questions that cuts really, really deep. I'll post the paper.
If somebody else want to
Well, I think there was in that paper where I think it was the one David wrote with the other David, the archaeologist. And there, I think it was that one where he said, like talking about the game and all that, like I just remember that he says that like kind of our current situation is like a game which has gone out of control. You know, like in a sense, he's talking about how like we see, like for example, some Native Americans, they used to swap between quite free ways of living, like at some point in the year, and then they all come together for the hunting of the buffalo. And how you know, they used to have this police, but they used to swap every year. So then the police at the time could not be very horrible because like another people would be the police the next year. So you know, they would hold them like to account. And so how, yeah, suddenly it seems like he asks there how we got so stuck in this system. And I think it's a very interesting thing, to be honest, like how, you know, to think about it that way, that yeah, it's kind of a game in which some people have taken the power to make all the rules and convince us that we don't have power, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, he's also talking, I think, in Busher Jobs about how it's like, or it's an article about Busher Job, how like all this hierarchy is a kind of BDSM game without a stop word. So you kind of keep entering there, but you never can say, okay, stop. I don't want to climb its hierarchy anymore, and I don't want to be beaten up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember the safe word, definitely. Yeah.
So should we resume now, or somebody else want to talk?
I mean, I can make one quick observation. So like late last year, I was reading David's ethnography. And I mean, of course, he wrote that in the early 90s. And even there, he is writing about this distinction between games and play, which I found really interesting, that, you know, it's something that he was thinking about for a long time, it seems like. Like he wrote about one of his like friends or informants when he was in Madagascar, about like how he had a pet cat, and a cat is a very like he was saying, like a not really a typical pet he would own in that part of Madagascar. And he was kind of drawing parallels between, like, you know, how a cat kind of plays with the mouse, like even when it's like dangerous. And like this person that he was writing about in the ethnography also had a very similar personality. So I mean, it was a very passing observation, but I mean, I like to like find out that, you know, he was all thinking about this like games and play even back then, you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to say at the end that we will have one more reading group next week, because it was planned for a long time ago, with Grigory Yudin, who is a translator of David Bulter-Jobs in Russian, and a professor, I think, in High Economic School in Moscow. And then on 22nd, we'll have a general assembly of Museum of Care, where we can discuss how we continue, what we're going to do, maybe talk about residences. So whoever, or new projects that was born meanwhile. So whoever wants to organize something during this assembly, or have an ideas, please, you know, let's put together an agenda. And then maybe we have so many people who sign up now for the next assemblies. After that, it will be like Alexei Yurchak. They offer, like, it's a really good, famous anthropologist with the book about end of Soviet Union, and also It's like just you can look at our schedule. We put it with Vasily. It's on the Google Doc and on Museum of Care website. But so I personally would like to make less. It's not every week, but maybe every other week, because I'm so overwhelmed. And now, like, it looks like I'm going to travel to New York someday, so it will be very difficult to make it every week. But I don't know how other people. Maybe we can divide it. So I don't know what is the opinion of other people about that.
I think it makes a lot of sense. Part of what I'm experiencing also with our free school is with the change of the season and this, the changing situation, public health situation, kind of the virtual space doesn't fulfill the same thing that it kind of fulfilled before. And I'm also feeling the need to kind of start to spread out my time in the computer. It's been so dense all year.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk about that on the 22nd and get to decide. But probably even the things that line up right now, we can spread them in the future. We probably will have then our plan until September or more. And yeah, and just see what's going on with the different projects that people doing. For example, I will talk about visual assembly also with Elizabeth and with Oleg Yasinski and Institute of Radical Imagination, and about publishing projects that I hope to initiate in the Museum of KA and David Graeber Institute. And also Fighting Club with Jonathan Harris on the 21st of June, yeah? Jonathan?
So it's the Church of Burn dates have changed. So it's the 22nd, 23rd and 24th of July.
July,
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we should just invite everybody who will send one more email in a mailing list. Everybody who wants to join or have any ideas about that. It's will be Michael Hudson and Steve King, and as well as probably David Graeber, Thomas Hobbes, as Steve Batchelor proposed, and some other ideas are on the table. So anyway, also welcome to everybody else to contribute to.
Shall we write the whole program on the? I was suggesting to write it in the reading group program to merge all the calendar there. And we also have the decision-making documentary. Are we having an interview this Saturday?
Oh no, I think we don't. I think we decided that we'll have now a very specific one, like 3 or 4. The one that is we absolutely need to do, like Rojava and the genius idea of Matt about agile software. That's really cool people. Yeah, and free and democratic schools. And Uncle, do you have any other suggestions about?
I took an agreement with my friend who's a medical doctor and epidemiologist. He works in health technology assessment, and I was very interested in discussing medical decision making because of the asymmetry of power and knowledge that it implies, and how can you deal with it. And apart from this, I have some other ideas, but if we want to wrap up, it's okay. I can. No.
I don't. So first of all, we don't need to wrap up. I'm just. I just think like I feel warm. It was for a while. I was doing like every week the assembly and every week documentary, and that was like too much for me. So now I'm like overwhelmed. So I just, if we can stretch it out and do it slowly, and probably it will be great. Oh, we will have this person, Steve. And his last name, he wrote this Devil's Anarchy, the book about pirates, that is amazing. And so he will come to the Museum of Care to talk about how pirates make decisions in the pirate ships and Pirate Republic. That is also very close to the David's book about pirates and Madagascar. So.
And for the 22 assembly, I would like also to discuss on our tools for coordination. And I mean, I had made a proposal for making Discord a bit more practical. And I would like to discuss this proposal on the 22. And also maybe something about what is a Museum of Care for us. I have plenty of stuff to tell about it. And so that's it. And when do we plan to have the reading group on Bakhtin that would be on possibilities too? I
think now it's after the 22nd, the next Thursday. But what maybe we should just discuss on 22nd how we plan the online meeting, and then based on that we kind of rewrite also reading group. What do you think?
Okay.
I would just, I don't know, do you think we should just put the precise date? Also possible. I don't know, what is better to do?
Oh, are you asking to me?
I know, Vasily, everybody.
For me, we can discuss on the 22nd on the program forward for the time after. So, and so we can agree on a schedule for a reading group and other assemblies, and we can decide whenever we want to have this reading group on Bakhtin. But I really look forward having this discussion. So let's not drop it.
Yeah, no, we don't drop anything. And in the worst case scenario, we just stretch the things, because we have so much interesting people who is coming to talk to us and teams. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Yeah, I learned so much. Go to keep reading Bashkar. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.